Hi, welcome. Here's your HMH lesson 7.6. So today we will be focusing on text organization in chronological order. I've talked about that so many times since the first day of school. Chronological order is when you put things in order for the order of how it happened. So when something happens first, next, and last. What happens in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. Those are all clues that the story is written in chronological order. So here it says the clue words for beginning is first, the clue words for the middle of the story is next and then, and the clue words for the end of the story is finally and last. When the author uses chronological order, they describe events or the steps in a process in order. This helps show how one event is connected to the other. It lets it make the story make more sense, okay? That this happened because of this. All right. Before we get started, you're going to need your text organization chronological order reading graphic organizer 21. It looks like this. If you do not have it, then I need you to go get that, and you can, hold on, how does it look? Where is it? I have so many tabs open. Okay. It looks like this. Okay, so if you don't have it, you can go ahead and pause the video and go get it now. Okay, now that you're back and you have this paper, you're going to write the title of the story, which is, we're going to write the title and then first, next, then, and last what happens in the story as we read. I'm not going to be writing in the graphic organizer, but you will. Instead, I'm going to be typing it in a Word document so you can read it more clearly. Okay? So we're going to start off by writing the title of the story. And the story we will be reading today is The Camping Trip That Changed America. So go ahead and write this down where it says title. The Camping Trip The Camping Trip That Changed America. If you need more time, you can pause the video now. Okay, after you went ahead and wrote down the title, let's go ahead and start reading the story. The story is The Camping Trip That Changed America.
The Camping Trip That Changed America. Teedy and Johnny didn't have much in common, but they shared a love of the outdoors. They both loved a good story, too. And that was enough to change America. Theodore Roosevelt's family had called him Teedy since he was a boy. He grew up in one of the oldest, richest families in New York City. Teedy was short and brawny, with a fashionable mustache. He loved the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and riding horses. He attended law school before becoming a politician. Theodore Roosevelt became the youngest president of the United States and lived with his wife and 6 children in the White House in Washington, D.C.
So this is Theodore Roosevelt. He was the youngest president of the United States. All right.
John Muir's family had called him Johnny since he was a boy. He grew up in the Midwest, the son of poor immigrant farmers. Johnny was tall, thin, and quiet, with shaggy hair that curled into a long beard. He loved the outdoors, studying, sketching, and writing about plants. He hiked the American wilderness alone and wrote about his travels. John Muir became a world-famous naturalist and protector of wild places with a special love for the Yosemite wilderness near his farmhouse in California. The White House, March 1903. Teedy settled into his favorite chair. He loved to end the day reading. Tonight, he chose a book by John Muir. Muir's adventures in California's Sierra Mountains sounded just about perfect to the busy president. It was strange then when Muir ended his story by asking for help for trees. He said the wild forests were vanishing. He called on the government to save them. The president thought about those mountain forests for a long time. Most people, even his own experts, thought America had so much wilderness it couldn't ever be used up. Was John Muir right? Could the forests disappear? How could the government help? As president, Teedy needed answers. Roosevelt wrote John Muir a letter. The president was planning a long trip to the western states. He asked John Muir to take him camping in California's Yosemite wilderness at the end of the trip. If America's forests needed help, the president wanted to see those trees for himself.
So what's the first thing that happened? The president, what's his name? Theodore Roosevelt, he wanted to visit the Yosemite wilderness, right? Or the park, to see and learn how much of America is a wilderness and how much wilderness there is in America and what we can do with it. So that's the first thing that happened. Let's write that down. So where it says first, we're going to write, oops, there we go. Theodore Roosevelt went to the Yosemite National Park to learn more about the wilderness. Okay, so write that down where it says first. If you need more time, you can pause the video now. Okay, now that you wrote that down, let's move on and keep reading. Let's see what he learns in the wilderness.
Roosevelt's train stopped in cities and towns along its route toward Yosemite. At each stop, bands played, officials gave speeches, and people crowded the platform to catch a glimpse of the popular president the newspapers nicknamed Teddy. May 15th, 1903. The train reached the end of the line in the small town of Raymond, California, about 30 miles outside the Yosemite wilderness. When he found men sending his baggage to the best hotel in town, Roosevelt shouted, "By George, I'm going camping! Pack me one small sack!" Along with a crowd of officials, townspeople, newspapermen, and photographers, John Muir waited to meet the president. Teedy shook Johnny's hand. "I've enjoyed your stories, Muir." The president spoke a few words to the crowd. Then he joined Muir in a waiting stagecoach. They bumped along the road to Yosemite. Another stop, more speeches. Muir was growing impatient. Didn't the president want to see the wilderness?
So he was going to meet with John Muir to go see the wilderness, but on his way, everybody keeps stopping him. He's making speeches. Why do you think that's so? Maybe because he was the president of the United States. It was a big deal.
Then Roosevelt's voice boomed, "Enough pictures, folks. I'd like to see the rest of this country in peace." The president sent his men ahead to set up camp. Leaving the shocked crowd behind, Teedy and Johnny rode off alone. "I feel like a runaway schoolboy," Teedy laughed as his horse galloped along.
You think he's enjoying the trip so far? I sure think he is.
They stopped near a family of giant sequoias in the Mariposa Grove. Surrounded by the trees of this ancient forest, for once Teedy was quiet. When he looked up, he couldn't see the treetops. The sequoias soared straight to the heavens. "These trees grew up when the Egyptians built the pyramids," said Johnny. "They are the largest living things on Earth. They never stop growing. unless they are cut down.
Wow, those are beautiful.
That night, under the branches of a towering sequoia called the Grizzly Giant, Teety lay on the 40 thick wool blankets his men prepared. Johnny made a bed from some branches and wrapped himself in an old cloth from his sack. He told Teety the funny story of meeting his first bear. I once saw a bear in a meadow. Now, bears are shy creatures, so I jumped out from behind a tree just to see him run away. The bear looks up. I ran toward him, shouting and waving. I finally stopped, or I would have run right into him. The bear rose up, put his claws on a log between us, and glared. Teety laughed. Was it a grizzly bear? He asked. Johnny shook his head. The only grizzly left in Yosemite today is this old tree. Hunters shot the last bear a few years ago. I'd made a big mistake about shy bears. I had to stand perfectly still for hours, or I would have been his dinner. Finally, the bear rambled off, checking back over his hind end to make sure I stayed put. That bear and I were both scared and embarrassed, but I tell you, it was the bear that had the better manners. Under the trees, Teety and Johnny slept.
So they're sleeping, they're camping in the wilderness, and Teety is teaching Mr. Roosevelt about the forest and why it's important and how to respect bears and wilderness and animals, how he came out and he thought they were shy animals, and then the bear taught him otherwise. He's like, oh no, really scared him. So he's teaching Mr. Roosevelt, John Muir is teaching Theodore Roosevelt about the wilderness and nature. So let's write that down. About the importance, why it's so important. Remember, he talked about the trees and how the trees were so important that people don't break them, or cut them down because they're so old, and they're going to keep growing and growing until someone does cut them. They never stop growing. So he's really teaching him about the importance of nature and why it's really important to respect nature. All right, so if you need some time to write this down, you can pause the video now. All right, after you wrote this down, let's keep going. Let's see what Mr. Roosevelt is going to think about all this.
May 16th, 1903. The next day, Teety and Johnny rode higher into the mountains, trading stories the way friends do. As the horses plowed through drifts of snow, they reached a peak called Glacier Point. Glaciers carved this whole valley, said Johnny, spreading his arms. He lay down on a slab of granite and inched along on his back to show how a massive river of slow-moving ice carved the rock beneath them millions of years before. They camped high above the valley floor. Johnny made the president a bed of branches, and they settled near the fire for warmth. Johnny began his story. This whole continent is a great garden. Before the beginning of time, ancient seas covered the land, churning the rocks into soil. As the seas dried, volcanoes sculpted mountains and valleys. Glaciers carved rivers and created plains. My children should see this place, said Teety. I hope it is still here for them, said Johnny. Trees and flowers grew into forests and meadows. Wild birds and beasts filled the land. Everywhere nature sang her melody. Can you hear it? Under the trees, Teety and Johnny slept.
So why do you guys think Johnny tells him if your kids are still here for it? what does he say? What is he trying to imply? He's trying to imply that if you do not take care of the wilderness and the forest, it'll be gone. This beautiful piece of the world or piece of the earth will be taken away, right? And why do you guys think at the end they keep saying under the trees they slept, under the trees they slept? That they're still camping, they're still in the wilderness, right? All right, so let's go ahead and write that down here. John Muir explained that if we do not take care of the wilderness, it will be destroyed. All right, or it'll be gone, basically. All right, so it would be destroyed. All right, so go ahead and write this down. If you need some time, you can go ahead and pause the video now. All right, let's keep going.
May 17th, 1903. Overnight, a storm blew in, spreading 5 inches of fresh snow. Teedy and Johnny woke under a coverlet of white flakes. They shook themselves off like 2 old grizzly bears. "Bully," said Teedy, stretching. "What a glorious day!" On horseback, Muir and Roosevelt rode down into the famous Yosemite Valley. The granite formations towered above them. They passed the sheared cliff of Half Dome and the fierce face of El Capitan rising from the valley floor. On their last night together, John Muir talked to the president about life in the wilderness. People were destroying wild land to make money from it. Ranchers cleared forests, prospectors mined gold, and companies planned to build hotels and shops throughout the valley. There was no one to stop them. "If they keep building, the wilderness won't last another 10 years, said Muir. "How can I help?" asked the president. "Keep it wild," Muir said, "and protect it forever."
So the people had ideas to build in the forest and to cut down the trees, and John Muir was really worried about that and said if they kept at it, in 10 more years there would be no more Yosemite Wild Park. And what do you guys think Theodore Roosevelt is going to do? He's the president. He has power. Let's see.
Together, Teedy and Johnny imagined a different future for America. What if everyone owned the wilderness? What if both rich and poor could spend time out in the open? What if we could save the forests for all the children to come? America's Wilderness, 1903 and beyond. Teedy left Johnny in Yosemite and headed back home. His time in the forest turned the outdoor-loving president into one of nature's fiercest protectors. Roosevelt pushed Congress to pass laws saving the wilderness. He failed at first, but that didn't stop him. He created national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and national forests. With John Muir's spirit as his guide, Theodore Roosevelt saved more wild land than any president in history. Teedy and Johnny never spent any time together again. Teedy traveled the world, but called the night of the snowstorm the one day of my life that I will always remember with pleasure. Johnny felt the same. He wrote that he fairly fell in love with the president. They exchanged personal letters for the rest of their lives. John Muir lies under the incense cedar trees he planted near his home in Martinez, California. Theodore Roosevelt lies beneath the sugar maples in the Roosevelt family plot in Oyster Bay, New York. For all time, under the trees, Teedy and Johnny sleep, and their shared spirit protects our wilderness forever.
Very nice. So their what do they mean by their shared spirit? maybe how they become really good friends. Now, did they see each other after this? No, but they kept in touch and they wrote letters to each other. And that trip changed a lot of things, right? It saved a lot of land and really taught Theodore Roosevelt more about the wilderness and why it's important. He was actually the most president in the history to protect so much wild land, right? All right, let's go ahead and write that down. So last, so Theodore Roosevelt saved a lot of wild land because he learned how important nature is from his friend John Muir. And that's basically the whole story. So if you need time to write this down, you can pause the video now. Okay, after you wrote all of this down, you're done with the reading graphic organizer. You just have one more thing to do today. I want you to work on the next page in your reading packet. There is a worksheet. It's labeled, let's see if I can find it here. I had it open. It's labeled, let me see. No, I can't find it now. Oh, here it is. Yep, okay. It's labeled words to know. You're going to use the words in the word bank to fill in the blanks where you think it belongs. It's pretty easy. I will take a trip with my better, with my father. Okay, with my together, no, with my father. So you're basically going to put the words that belong in the blanks. Here you're going to write a sentence for a word you did not use. Pretty simple. And that's it. That's all you're doing today. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you guys later. Bye.